Um, Thank you all for coming and for joining our first event of the year. As all of you know, last year, at the end of last year, we published our impact report to highlight what we've achieved together and yeah, to show all the hard work that you and we did with us. Which kind of sparked this event. So firstly, to quickly introduce myself, I'm Ruth Chidija, the Supported Care and Fundraising Officer. And we're joined here today with a number of our staff. We've got Oisín. I don't think I need to give a proper introduction to Oisín, but yeah, our CEO. Anne is here as well, our Deputy CEO. Claudia, our Head of Supported Care and Fundraising. Circuitony, the Head of Campaigns. Claire O'Connor, the Program Coordinator for our Heat campaign. And Charlotta is here as well, and Nandana. So a few of our staff will be talking later as well, so you'll hear them. We're also joined by a couple of board members, but I know Carol Ann O'Ryan, you're already on the call. We're also going to be joined by Anna Pringle, our chair, Elaine Spallin, our treasurer, and Denise Charlton as well. So yeah, I suppose I can start sharing my screen so you can actually see some nice pictures as well. Right. Um, Hopefully you can see my screen now in the presentation. So, all right. Yeah, so just to kind of give an overview from what you're going to expect for the next hour or so, we'll be giving a high-level overview of last year, looking back at all what we did. Well, not all, because it's hard to summarize all of it, but we're going to be looking back at a few highlights and then also teasing what's to come in 2025. This will take approximately 30 to 40 minutes, and then we'll open the floor to for any questions. So you can when you have questions at that point, I'll let you know, and feel free to either raise your hand or put them in the chat. We will be recording this, so supporters who won't be able to join us today are able to, well, yeah, listen back. So if you're not comfortable, feel free to turn off your camera as well. So yeah, so I don't know, I was thinking of like, okay, how can I summarize all that we did? Yeah, like I said, we did a lot and everybody worked really hard. And also to think about what photos can I accompany with it. Now these are only a snippet of all the photos we took, and I think just the variety of things we did, it shows how much, yeah, how much we did. And one thing, think for me, what really summed up the year for me was building community and in the climate movement. The elections were key in moments to mobilize people. We will talk about the elections and all of that in a bit. But in terms of kind of movement building, I think those were key moments where people felt, their moment to get involved, and either people who were already there, supported for a long time, but also new people who, realize that climate is a big thing that we need to talk about. So through initiatives like Act Local, where we help local activists and groups to be visible for climate action. Yeah, there are lots of ways for people to get involved. And in a world where sometimes it seems that people are not really listening, I think looking at the impact report, what really struck me was the different types of climate action that there is, and that there is actually a lot more happening than we realize. And I think it's very easy when we look at all the noise on yeah, like on the news that it's all very negative. But when you look at something like the impact report, you can see the different ways that people are mobilizing, and that the climate movement is a lot bigger than we think it is. So whether it's like, we had a lot of people signing our e-actions and sending pledges or asking TDs to sign pledges, people leafleting, we had people singing on the street. Now this was two Christmases ago, but I think that was a unique kind of climate action. People, participating in photo stunts, fundraising for the cold water dip that we did last year, Couple for Climate, and also the amount of local action groups that were formed in the last year. One of them, for instance, formed after a Couple for Climate meeting in Portlaoise. So all in all, it shows that there's different types of climate actions, but also that we need that as well. And yeah, and then I was thinking back, what are the other moments that were really important? And one of the bigger events that we had was the Earth Day conference, which was it was Earth Day, as it says there. And this was a very special day because we had both engagement with political figures that we invited. We had a panel discussion on our energy future where experts were talking about the rollout of renewable energy. And then we also had a panel gathered from individuals from various sectors who were affected in different ways. Either communities are affected or people involved in civil society. And throughout today, I suppose the emphasis was very much on the urgency of system change and also the need for all of those elements that was in that day, but just generally anyone in our society needs to, get involved to make that change happen. In terms of also our campaigns as well, like again, it's so hard to summarize all that we've done, but just to kind of highlight a few wins. We had the positive return scheme launched last year after years of campaigning through our Sick of Plastic campaign together with Voice. I think it was in the same month as well where Claire O'Connor and Jerry, our head of policy, addressed a joint Oireachtas committee as well to address energy poverty in Ireland. Then around the same time as well, we had the launching of the joint report together with the Bohemian Football Club. You can see a photo there as well, talking about how sport clubs can mobilize communities toward climate action. And yeah, and then on top of that as well, our data center campaign, which is not really addressed in the impact report just because the impact report was launched before the data center protest in November. But I feel like towards the end of the year, there was a lot more focus on data centers also in the news. And it kind of shows that by us and everyone here, talking about it, it's now kind of becoming a topic for many Irish people. And that's what we want. We want people to talk and that's how we can start making changes. So that's basically me trying to summarize everything that happened in the last year. But to go in a bit more depth and also kind of looking forward, I think, I'll hand it over now to our next speaker. Sorcha, are you available? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just going to try and share my screen and not ruin Ruth's really good presentation. So I'm sorry, Ruth.
You're fine.
So you have to stop sharing. Yeah, I'll press yes and see if it allows us. So hi, everybody. Sorry, my name's Sorcha. Thanks a million, Ruth, for that lovely introduction and start. Can everyone see it? I'm trying to get it to slideshow.
Yes, now.
Yes. Thank you very much. So I'm not looking back, I'm looking forward, but a bit of a reflection as well on what we've done over the last year. And as Ruth said, some of the work we have done isn't covered in the impact report, but that's just because we do so many things. But also, as Ruth said, like a key area for our focus over this year, 2024 and some of 2023, was about getting people to engage and talk about climate change in, I suppose, in relation to elections, climate change in relation to Europe, like it was the year of the elections, really. And for an organisation that focuses on policy change, obviously elective moments and informing how people vote or how people think about voting, and the policies that people want to vote for is a key aspect of our work. So I put up a slide here around our Programme for Government campaign. Again, we can't show everything, but really what we were working on includes the June elections, the European elections, and some of the local elections. And as Ruth has already mentioned, we had a lot of work to provide, I suppose, opportunities for groups and everyone involved and our supporters to get involved and take action and to tell their parliamentarians or those running for election that they cared about climate. And a key piece of this work was aligning and really trying to focus our demands around our key areas and what we wanted people to communicate. So firstly, we wanted them to say they cared about climate, but then we really wanted them to communicate what are the key areas that we wanted the government to take action. And this was the same across the European and the EU, our local elections as well. So it is around the government's accountability plan, like the climate law, the European Commission reductions, but also then making sure that Ireland has a strong voice on Gaza and ceasefire in Gaza, and it's a key part of our work and in Ukraine as well, and around the occupied territories bill. So those are the kind of the government must. And following on for that, like Claire will obviously talk a lot about heat and housing, but a key area of our work, and you all know it very well and probably know it better than me, is around warm homes, our warm homes campaign, and asking politicians to prioritize this issue and make sure that the policies they were pushing forward really allowed for warm homes retrofitting access. And I won't talk anymore about it, Claire, I promise. And then the other side of it is around government action. So we wanted them to talk about big data and big tech and energy guzzlers. And I won't speak too much more about the data centre element because I'm going to speak about that in a few seconds. But also it's around keeping Ireland LNG free and looking at fossil fuel phase out and our new fossil fuel proliferation treaty. So there's some of the areas that we tried to hone in. We work on a lot of areas, and we also had aspects around transport and agriculture. But for us, these three primary areas are key to us and key to the change we need to see from government. And we really focused on ensuring that as many of the people that we engaged with and those people that they engaged with had these demands in their hands and knew about them. So we went around the country working with our supporters, talking through these demands, printing leaflets, enabling our email action and enabling our social media activities to push these as much as possible. So it was really about trying to get the message out in, as Ruth has already said, a difficult period for climate movements around the world. So we were really trying to book the trend, I suppose, and in some ways we did, and some ways we didn't. Just to give you a sense of someone, I know Caroline is on the call, but some of the actions that we took, like there was more than 10 different groups, that took actions around the country, particularly around both on the EU and European, or EU and local, but also on the local government election or parliamentary elections. And there was actions in Donegal, Louth, all over the country, as much as we could do possible in the time before the election. So I think we can be very proud of what we did. And if you look across the sector, I think we were probably one of the few across many sector groups or supporters that got out and asked our government or our parliamentarians to do something. Another part of, I suppose, our election work, and this was run by the movement building team as well as our colleagues on the Stop Climate Chaos Coalition, was trying to luckily or not luckily, the COP, not luckily maybe for staff because we were all wrecked, but COP came just before the elections. So it was about using that massive global climate moment to inform or to use the media hook, I suppose, to get as much attention on the need for climate in the new government's manifesto and a need in the new government to prioritise climate. So we asked Aaron's cousin, who's a colleague, to come out and stand in freezing cold and get fake oil dripped on her. But it was a really powerful image, and it just spoke, I suppose, to our climate justice work as well and the work we do and with the Stop Climate Coalition and looking to inform and improve negotiations with COP, particularly around climate finance. So that was just something, and this I think got in most of the media coverage on the election, which was great for us because it was really difficult to get in at that time on climate. Just just to give a brief of why I'm here, as well as our lovely colleague Rosie, who leads this work, is on paternity, or no, what is it? Family leave. So she's just off for a few weeks, so I'm covering for her, and you can see Rosie in the picture there. And this year we have been working on data centres and highlighting the climate impact of data centres for some years. But this year we've really zoned in and focused on that work and really to have, I suppose, given it a priority within the organisation for many reasons. One, because data centres have a massive impact on our energy system and are guzzling our energy system. Also, there are many popping up across the country, and as we know, Ireland has got the most data centres in Europe. But also, I think as a campaigning organization, it speaks to many different communities, not just those who care about climate, but those who care about big tech and digital security, also about the impact of growth and data centers selling products to people. So there's many areas of data centers that we really care about, and we've been working on it for like really focusing on. We're going to do much greater and bigger things in the next year on data centers led by Rosie. Ruth, keep an eye on the time for me. Really, if you think I'm running over, let me know. But the photo on the left, I think it might be on your left, but it's on my left, is a protest that Rosie organised with Extinction Rebellion outside Ireland's data centre conference. So it's a really big data center conference, and this was a really good timing again around the election to highlight the impact of data centers. And these are some of the graphics that we have been working with the data centers campaign. And a huge part of the data center is for us to inform government policy around data centers. So there's the ultimate aim, which would be the vision of change, is around a moratorium on data centers. If you look where we are globally and European, we're at what you call a peak saturation point. So we've reached a point where we're growing, and our data centers are growing too fast for our climate commitments and our climate budgets, and it's actually taking so much energy out of the system that we're not able to keep up with it with renewables. So a key part of us is around that moratorium, but also for our work in data centers is about transparency. There's a very little transparency in reporting about data centers, how many data centers we are, what energy they're taking, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a few areas within the data centers campaign that we're focusing on the policy change at the EU level and the national level. Just to say as well, this is one of the big campaigns that we are reaching beyond Ireland. We are working with movements globally. We hopefully are going to San Francisco in a few months. Rosie is going to have the first big tech data think-in on data and data centers, and kind of pushing back against data centers. And we're one of the few faux Europes that really focus on this, and it's actually, the issue is going to only get worse. So it's really important that we're out and strong on it at the moment. A part of our research then is commissioning research, and we've worked really well with Hannah Daly from UCC, who is, as you all know, is an energy expert, has worked with us for many years, is a really renowned, I suppose, one of the strongest voices on climate in the media, and we're very lucky to have her in the climate movement, to have this type of research, and she helps us kind of unpack and uncover what really is happening behind the scenes with data centers and how much energy they're taking. And it's quite hard information to get, and it's quite detailed work, and it's one of the reasons why we're trying to call for more transparency, because many people don't know what data centers are doing to their grids, and how many are connected to gas, how many are still using new fossil fuel connections. So it's a really important piece of work, is to look at this research and then see how we can campaign for policy change. And these are just some of the quotes from Rosie and Professor Hannah Daly around this research report. And the timing again of the research report, again, we're trying to build pressure all the time on politicians. So we released the research report around the programme for government negotiations, a key moment. I think it got covered in every media outlet. Hannah was on lots of programmes. Rosie had a really good drive time debate with one of the data centres main lobbyists, and really did us justice and did us proud. So it's a really, for us, it's a key campaign that we're going to keep working on and pushing for going forward. And I think, yes, I think that's it from me. I hope that's okay, Ruth.
Yeah, that's great.
Covered.
Thanks so much,
Yeah,
Sorcha.
thank you so much.
All right. I'll hand it over now to Claire.
Thanks, Ruth. Sorcha, I'm going to remove your spotlight, I think. Hi, everyone. Really lovely to see you all. And thanks, Sorcha, for introducing some of our work. Sorcha joined us at the end of 2023, so we're really lucky to have her on board, and she's really hit the ground running, I think, as our head of campaigns this year. So we're, delighted to have Sorcha. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you some of the work that we've done as part of our HEAT programme, which I coordinate and lead on. So I'm going to share a little bit about what we've done so far over the last year in 2024, and where we're at now, and looking ahead, and what our priorities are for the next year. So I'm just Can you see? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, I work on the Warm Homes for All program, which is tackling both energy poverty and energy pollution. And I'll go through quickly why exactly we work on this specific area, because some people, it's not always immediately clear that link between energy poverty and decarbonisation and Friends of the Earth work. So if we look at buildings in Ireland, at the moment, buildings contribute to 37% of our annual emissions. And when we look at like Ireland relative to the rest of the EU, we use 7% more energy and emit 60% more carbon than the EU average. 80% of homes have a building energy rating of lower than a C. So we're quite inefficient homes. And for those inefficient homes, the cost of meeting your basic energy needs can be up to 55% higher than a better insulated home. So we've very leaky buildings, and we've buildings that are very expensive to keep warm as well. That's one of the main reasons. But if you look a little bit deeper into that, annually we have the highest mortality rates for or excess winter mortality rates, with 2,800 excess deaths in Ireland every year, which they attribute to cold homes. And children living in cold homes are over twice as likely to suffer from respiratory issues. There's an impact on mental health, and increasing our ambition in home retrofitting could generate health and well-being benefits of around 600 million euro every single year. So there's a really good case for doing more on retrofitting from an emissions perspective, from a health perspective, and from an economic perspective as well. And when you look at where Ireland is with regards to our actual heating compared to the rest of Europe, we are literally paddy last. Nearly every other EU country has more renewable heat than we do. So we're just at 6% at the moment. So we're predominantly reliant on oil and gas, unfortunately, to heat our homes. So that's one of the main reasons really that we at Friends of the Earth are working in this area, because we've a lot of work to do still. And the reason we've brought in the kind of social justice, climate justice element is because people who are already marginalized in ways are often living in the worst housing conditions. They're locked into using fossil fuels, and they're kind of then at the mercy of volatile energy prices, and can't then access the renewable energy solutions that we want people to be able to access. So we can really get everyone involved in the energy transition. So I'll do a little quick run through of what we've been up to on this work program over the last year. In March, we did some brilliant work with the Irish Green Building Council, and we released a report called Bridging the Gap Between Energy Poverty and Energy Renovation. And we looked at how exactly home retrofitting can be targeted in a way that it lifts people out of energy poverty, improves their comfort, and reduces their energy bills. And we had a really good launch event with the Irish Green Building Council. And it was actually a brilliant project because we got a lot of the local authorities involved who are doing the retrofitting of social housing. We got the energy agencies involved, and a lot of people who are actually on the ground retrofitting kind of told us exactly what the issues were, and we came up with this report as to how it can really be made better and more accessible. So it was a really great project, and I think a lot more will actually come out of that, bringing together those stakeholders who are involved in retrofitting to talk about the problems and come up with the solutions together. Another piece of work we did was this Levelling the Playing Field report with Bohemians Football Club. That was really looking at community-led climate action, so how institutions like sports clubs that already exist, that people are already involved in, can be leveraged to really get everyone involved in climate action and get them to feel the benefits of retrofitting. So we did a report on that. We launched it in Leinster House. We got incredible engagement from politicians. They were all really, really excited about this report and this piece of work in particular. And it just seemed to really land with people looking at that kind of local approach to climate action. That got people really excited. So I think more will come from this as well going forward. Another part of the work that I do is coordinating an energy poverty network. It's a group of social justice and environmental NGOs, and we come together and we do collective advocacy, collective campaigning on the issue of the energy transition and making sure that we have a socially just energy transition that doesn't leave anyone behind. part of that this year was making a joint submission to the Energy Poverty Action Plan. Part of this work, a really positive thing that's happened over the last year, is that we now have a really strong relationship with the Department of Climate, who come to us now to ask us for advice on how they should do things like public participation, and we're now starting to see the policies that we're recommending be reflected in government policy as well, which is really, really positive. So that's there's lots of momentum behind that energy poverty network, and I think I can see that continuing on going forward. There's lots of energy and enthusiasm from all the other groups as well. Then I know Sorcha kind of talked a little bit about the elections. We did some work on elections again with the Energy Poverty Network. We came up with our 8 collective priorities and what we want to see in a new programme for government. We did an op-ed with the Irish Examiner looking at the issue of the private rental sector and how they to date have not been included in any retrofit schemes. And yeah, so looking forward, there were lots of other things that happened. I think there's more in the impact report. You mentioned that myself and our head of policy, Jerry, presented to an Oireachtas committee as well, the Committee on Social Protection, and they took on lots of our policy recommendations as well in their report out of that. Yeah, shout if I'm talking for too long. I'll talk very briefly about looking forward. The issue I mentioned there around the private rental sector is a massive gap in government policy that exists at the moment. And we see a lot of synergies between the retrofitting the rental sector and the housing crisis, and how we can really bring the climate movement and the housing movement together and start to do some collective advocacy to improve housing conditions, and also to make sure that tenants or non-homeowners aren't left out of climate action, which I think is really important when people are struggling already with the housing crisis and with rental prices, that they're not also just at the mercy, the ones who are struggling the most with the high energy prices as well. So that will be a project we'll be working on going forward. It'll be one of our big campaigns, looking at private rental sector and social housing as well, and how we can improve housing conditions and bring down emissions at the same time. We're going to do more work with Bohemians Football Club as well, looking at how we can kind of expand that community-led retrofitting approach. There's lots more to be done on heat decarbonisation, as you've seen. There's a lot of work, I think, that still needs to be done looking at oil boilers in rural Ireland in particular. People are, effectively just locked into fossil fuels at the moment, and it's really important that there is an affordable, accessible alternative available to people. So that's what we'll be advocating for as well. Looking forward, we obviously have a new government. It'll be important that we start to build relationships with the new government and understand what their priorities are, and make sure that they understand what our priorities are as well going forward. At a national level, there's some really nerdy, exciting things that I think are exciting. We're transposing some cool EU directives, the one on the Energy Performance in Buildings Directive, Energy Efficiency Directive, and the Social Climate Fund as well. So they're my exciting projects over the next little while, making sure that Ireland transposes those really good directives in an ambitious way, and that we make the most of those new regulations coming in from the EU that have a massive potential in terms of bringing down emissions and addressing energy poverty as well. I have a few more slides, but I won't talk for too long because I've talked for quite a bit already. But yeah, thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, feel free to stick them in the chat. And I'm going to put a little link to our new tenants campaign into the chat as well, so everyone can see and get involved. Thanks a million, everyone.
Thanks so much, Claire. Yeah, well, our Q&A will start after, we'll first let Oisín say a few words, and then we'll start with the Q&A. So I see there's already a question or two in the chat. So Oisín, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Ruti. Cool EU directives. There's a phrase I don't hear very often, Claire. But EU directives, actually, I'll make a more serious point. Over time, the explicit role of the EU regulations and EU directives and laws in Irish environmentalism has often been very important, and it's sometimes a bit less important, and particularly if and when we think a government in Ireland isn't going to be great on its own political drive to make a difference, then the EU stuff becomes more important. And so I wouldn't be at all surprised if the EU side of things is more important over the next few years, then maybe gets more attention from us than it got over the last couple of years. I want to talk a little bit about the general context as I see it. But before that, I want to just make a couple of comments on what Claire and Circa were saying, because I'm really excited by the work that they've described, and I'm really proud of the direction it's going and the direction that my colleagues are taking it. Like we've always prided ourselves in Friends of the Earth on joining forces around our shared campaigning goals, because we've always known that even as we've grown, we're too small to have the power on our own. So, like going back, God help us, however many years to the Stop Climate Chaos Coalition, which is founded primarily with overseas aid agencies, to the environmental pillar with the other national environmental NGOs. To we had at one time an Irish corporate leaders group on climate change that we helped make happen, and obviously we've collaborated with the trade unions around Just Transition and a Just Transition Alliance. But the one actually of all of those, the one that's I'm kind of most proud of is the one that I had least to do with, which is the one that Claire has built over the last couple of years. The work did begin before that. It began with my colleague Catherine and myself a little bit, and indeed Anya Gorman, around reaching out and listening and talking to those whose primary drive is around social inequality and social disadvantage in Ireland, because we began to feel initially our messaging around around carbon tax wasn't appropriate or wasn't landing correctly in that wider context, and we began to talk to them more and more. But in the context of Claire's energy poverty work as part of retrofitting and decarbonising heat, and then particularly post the Russian invasion of Ukraine and that energy price spike driven by fossil fuels, of course, Claire has done amazing groundwork on building a relationship of trust, and indeed where they rely on her to work to coordinate and to highlight the energy poverty aspect when they're dealing primarily with poverty generally, but the energy poverty aspect. I'm really excited that work has built as strong as it has, and is deepening our messages. When I started 20 years ago, we'll come on to that later. If we got on the radio or the TV, we got the 16 seconds. So we just said pollution, reduce pollution, what now? And we didn't get to talk about the way to do that fairer. We only talked about needing to do it at all, never mind faster. As we have had more of a platform and carved out more of a space, we took us a while maybe, but we began to realize we had to talk more about the how you do it and the way you do it fairly. And it's so we did that in our messaging, but it's really good to see it take hold now in the substance of our work that Claire is leading as our program coordinator on heat. So I just wanted to say that as we're looking back and looking forward. But the other one then is on the data centers, because obviously we've done lots and lots of work on fossil fuels and on keeping it in the ground and all of that. But we've one of our overarching messages over decades as environmentalists is one planet, and you can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. But in practice, our messages tend to be more specific than that. They're about a climate law or a deposit return scheme or whatever it might be. And we don't get into that broader discussion about consumerism or indeed economic systems like capitalism more broadly. And I think the data centers campaigning allows us to begin to have that discussion about sufficiency and enough, because they're colonizing our power system, and they're demanding more and more power and more fossil fuels in order to mine our personal data, in order to sell us more stuff that we don't need. So it is a very resonant, I think for the general public, a very resonant way to begin that discussion around, is this necessary? Is energy for whom, as my colleagues often say, and energy for what? So I think the way that work is developing is really exciting. And actually, I meant to say, I talked about the groups that are focused primarily on social inequity and social inequality, but the tenants one as well is really interesting because it's part of the larger housing crisis, and it's the groups that we're beginning to work with around tenants are groups that we wouldn't have worked with before as Friends of the Earth. We're reaching a different forms of activism, different motivations, but again, shared interests and joining forces there is very exciting. And again, on data centers, it's one that appeals to a lot of the grassroots climate campaigners. So I'm really excited about where that program of work that Claire described and the campaigns around data centers and tenants can bring us. But anyway, in the remaining few minutes I have before we go to Q&A, I want to say a few words about the political context now, because we've kind of alluded to it, but I think it's worth talking about, because I think we could find it quite dispiriting depending on what we look at and how we analyze it. Because in the context, there's the broader international picture we might come back to. When I wrote the introduction to this impact report, I think I said I was hovering between hope and dread for various reasons, and that was before the US election results. So you can imagine on that spectrum, or that seesaw, where on the hope and dread, where my balance is since then, but I'm more inclined to since then. But in the wake of our election here, there's a bit of a media narrative, I think, that is disproportionate to the reality, thankfully, that well, that's the end of that climate stuff. The Healy Rays are in charge now. The new government isn't going to do anything, and we grappled with this as we analysed the programme for government and thought about our messaging, because I think it's really important how we set expectations of not of ourselves, but of the political system over the next 5 years. And there was a risk that what would happen now would be what happened in 2011, the last time there was a kind of a change of government that looked like a change of policy on climate as well, in a big way, which was that Fine Gael and the civil service, when they came in, said, well, those targets are mad for 2020 in that case. Those Greens agreed to things we shouldn't be agreeing to. There's no way we can meet them. We're not going to try. They weren't quite as blunt as that, but that was effectively their strategy. And they spent 5 years arguing with the EU Commission that we shouldn't have to meet the targets we had for 2020, and didn't adopt a single climate action plan in those 5 years. So that could have happened again now. The new government could have ditched an awful lot of commitments as opposed to just simply action. And that hasn't happened. That isn't the situation. And I think there's a few different reasons for that. The main thing to say is that, well, I'll come on to the programme for government in a second. One of them is public opinion has changed, and we made it our business to make sure, we've always worked with all parties. We are non-partisan. We never can say we prefer one party to another. But we try to show all parties that the public supports climate action. Well, we all know that some parties support climate action more than others. But what was really interesting in the exit poll, and we did some polling ourselves, that 51% of all of those questions in the exit poll said that the outgoing government hadn't gone far enough on climate action. And that included 47% of all Fianna Fáil voters and 44% of Fine Gael voters, compared to only 15 or 16% of their voters who'd said they'd gone too far. Now, that wasn't what you got from, the backbenchers or the way the Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil ran their election campaigns. They were trying to avoid being outflanked by the rural independents or the regional independents, and they were throwing the Greens under a bus pretty much. And yet, for every one voter of theirs in the election who said that they'd gone too far in climate action, there were three voters who'd said they hadn't gone far enough. So, and again, when we did some polling recently, 59% of Fianna Fáil voters and 57% of Fine Gael voters want the new government to do more on climate than the last government. So there's really strong public support for more action on climate. And when you combine that then with the programme for government, which there's two interesting things, and there's lots of problematic. They recommit to 51% reductions in emissions by 2030. They recommit to net zero by 2050 at the latest, and they recommit to an annual climate action plan to actually put in place the measures to achieve that. Now, on the one hand, that is basically the law, things that are in the law that they all voted for, and I'll come back to the law in a second. But on the other hand, they could have not said them, or they could have tried to water them down. So it's, from a campaigning perspective, it's much easier to campaign on that when they've said it in the programme for government. Like, you said you intended to meet those targets, you said you still accepted them, and so on. There's been no resiling from that. Now, on the other hand, they say they want more data centres, more intensive export-oriented farming, more roads, no passenger cap in Dublin Airport. So there is, as we've described it, and has taken hold a bit, we weren't the only ones to say this, but it's taken hold a bit in the narrative, a bit of what you might describe as cakeism, as in wanting to have their cake and eat it, as in wanting to have the climate targets and more polluting industries too. So, but that contradiction gives us a strong framing for why the government, well, you're saying this, you're promising this on climate, but you're doing this. That's a much stronger position for us than if the media took a position now that, oh well, the government promised nothing on climate. Then the Greens were gone and they've given us, there's nothing in the programme for government on climate. You might get a day or two of a storm in a teacup, but then as the government failed to do things or took bad decisions in the next few years, the media would go, well, that's what we expected. They said they'd do nothing. That's not the case. And we need to actually push the narrative that the government has committed to 51% to climate action, to net zero, etc. And therefore, we must expect them, and they should be held accountable by us, by the media, by the courts, of course, as well, and by the Parliament, not just to the law, but to what they promised themselves. And I think that's going to be really important framing for some of our campaigning as we go forward over the next few years. And of course, the other really big difference, and this is worth us when we're talking about our impact, it's worth touching on. The really big difference between now and previous changes of government is the climate law. The climate law was designed for this moment. When we started that campaign in 2007, we said it was so that it was to hardwire climate change into the political and administrative system, so that all governments across time and all departments across government would take climate action seriously and take climate action consistently, climate change seriously and climate action consistently. Now we're going to test that now. This is the test for that over the next few years. But there is the parliamentary scrutiny, like the Independent Climate Change Advisory Council. There is the reports from the EPA and the Climate Council, and each of those creates a moment for the media to pay more attention. And the media is a lot better than it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago as well. So there's more moments where we can, where our voices as campaigners can be heard in the context of because there's a generalized expectation that the government should be acting in line with the law and in line with Paris and in line with science to some degree. So while probably the campaigning context as it is, not as badly as it is across Europe or in the US, the campaigning context has gotten more challenging. We have more tools at our disposal, as well as our own campaigning and organizing and activist energy. We have more levers at our disposal and more sticks at our disposal as we try to push the government towards action. So, and I do think so. I just said before this, you may have seen headlines. There's court cases coming on the climate law being used, and there's a very amazing court case, amazing judgment recently, which was really emphasized how strong the climate law is and how clearly this judge expected, in that case on Bord Pleanála, to use to respect the law in making decisions. So that's really interesting to say. Friends of the Earth, in the last few decades anyway, hasn't seen legal challenges as being a main part of our work. We've more been focused on Parliament, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 5 years we'll certainly be considering who, whether it's us or others, are taking court cases to hold the government to account for reducing emissions in line with the law that we all campaigned for so long.
Great. Thank you so much, Oisín. We'll start the Q&A now. So feel free to put something in the chat, or if you're comfortable, feel free to also turn on your microphone. That's what I was looking for. Like I said, it is being recorded, but we're only showing it to the people who are not able to make it today, but who did sign up to our event today. So, all right, I think there was already a question or two in the chat. Let me have a look. So there is one question, and this might be for you, Oisín. What is our relationship with the Green Party after our comments on their election manifesto?
The short answer is I don't fully know, because one reason is we haven't had that much interaction with any of the parties really since the election, because of the Christmas break, and our campaigning focus has been focused on the parties that were engaged in the programme for government negotiations, although we shared our briefings and our demands with all parties. But I'll say a few words of context, because this has come up with supporters a bit. So first of all, those who don't know, we commissioned 3 independent academics to, as we had done 5 years ago, to analyse the programme for government, the manifestos of, in the end, I think 7 or 9 parties, against our Friends of the Earth manifesto. 5 years ago, they did it against the One Future campaign manifesto that we ran with lots of other organisations. This time it was against the Friends of the Earth manifesto. And last time the Greens got a B, but they came top. This time they got a B, but they came third because because the Social Democrats and Labour put more effort into making their manifesto be aligned with ours, because all of our demands had been well flagged, and indeed we've been providing background papers to the parties for over a year on the various things that we thought should be done. But when that was well, not actually when it was announced. It was announced on Monday, the 25th of November, 4 days before the election. But subsequently, we heard the Greens were, angry that they hadn't come first, and that they were being questioned about why Soc Dem and Labour's were better than had scored better than them. I say one thing. We hired 3 academics to score the manifestos against our demands. And the truth was, when they looked at it, that Labour and Soc Dems had more of our demands more clearly articulated in their manifestos. And there was some complaining by Green Party supporters more than I saw from TDs that it was unfair to only assess the manifesto and not to assess delivery in government. And manifestos don't tell you whether a party will actually deliver in government. Well, that's true, and there was some. Not that it's unfair, but it's untrue. It's true that manifestos only tell you one thing. But like in a general election, political parties publish manifestos for the purposes of telling you what they plan to do, and the media, voters, everybody is expected to evaluate them and assess them and compare them. That is the point of manifestos. And we did exactly as we did 5 years ago, and exactly what we told parties we were going to do, which was assess them against what we had been asking for. And whether we like it or not, or whether they like it or not, they just hadn't done as good a job of writing down in their manifestos the things that we said were important. Now, we absolutely agree. And I thought at the time that their response in this was correct, as in, yes, but can delivery is different to promising. Absolutely. Like whether a party delivers in government is, first of all, do they have any leverage when it comes to negotiations, which transpired nobody did this time. Do they prioritize it when they get in? And you can absolutely have a debate. Did Labour prioritize it properly in 2011, 2015 versus did the Greens prioritize it properly now? And then how good are you at doing it? The Greens were much better at doing it this time than they were in 2007, 2011. So there's lots of things that contributes to how impactful a party is in government, whether it's the PDs, Labour, whoever, Greens or whoever. But like during an election campaign, it is not an unreasonable thing to do to assess parties' manifesto against a set of benchmarks, and that's what we did. And theirs wasn't as good as others, and that's what we published. And of course, we didn't recommend anyone how they should vote because a charity can't do that, and specifically not during an election campaign. We just said we analysed this. We didn't even do it. We asked 3 academics to do it. This is what they found. So look, I've been around this block a few times. The Labour Party stopped talking to us for 6 months one time because they didn't like what we said. In my experience, politicians, like campaigners, move on, get over things, keep their eyes on the prize, focus on what they need to do next. We will talk to all parties. In my time here, we have worked with 7 ministers in governments of different stripes, 4 different parties, 1 independent minister, 2 Fine Gael, 2 Fianna Fáil, 1 Labour, 1 independent, 2 Greens in ministers for climate. So we'll talk to them all. They will talk to us ultimately. We expect to collaborate with all parties over the coming 5 years. And it seems the Greens think that our assessment contributed to the tough time they had in the election. All the analysis apart from them suggests it was more to do with being the smaller party in government. It's being to do with what they prioritised in government and what other voters would have liked them to do, and the usual thing about big small parties in government coalitions being the mudguard, etc. There's little evidence that what we said a few days before the election was what mattered most compared to the things that happened over the course of 5 years or more. So, but we will continue to talk to them. I've met with Minister Ryan, or as he was, after the election in the context of just transition. We're in touch with all TDs, and I'm sure we will be collaborating with TDs of all parties and none over the next 5 years.
Thanks, Oisín. There's another question in the chat that's on the same topic, so I'll go for that one first. So would Friends of the Earth do the same analysis of the manifestos again?
I don't know. It's better to be by the look of it, it will be 2029 before we have an election. So it's a bit early to say whether we will pursue the exact same strategy around that election as we did around the last 2 elections. But all I can say is it remains a very obvious thing to do to compare what you demand of politicians against what they promise. And I should say, actually, Sinn Féin wrote to us to complain. Certainly supporters of People Before Profit complained. Micheál Martin and Simon Harris on live television in the leaders' debate because they were challenged on it. Also tried to respond. When you criticize a party, any party, and because the real news from that, and this is the news that we made from it, was that the three parties that wanted to lead government all got E's, as opposed to the difference between A for Soc Dems and Labour and a B for the Greens. Like the real difference was Soc Dems, Labour, the Greens, and People Pro Profit that got A's and B's, and the three parties that were vying to be Taoiseach all got E's. That was the actual news, and that was the actual news that we pushed in our press release, and the news that the likes of David McCullough and the TV anchors in the leaders' debate got from it. It was more in parties themselves and in some online commentary that the Greens were the focus of attention.
Great, thanks, Shane. There's a question here for Claire. It's a bit of a paragraph, so give me a second. So on warmer homes and retrofitting, it's great to see renter homes and rural homes prioritised. Could I add that older houses in cities and towns are also left out, as heat pumps don't work for most terrace houses, and the SEAI itself admits that its schemes have suited semi-Ds and one-off houses. So Claire, would you agree that what we need overall is retrofitting schemes that aren't based on a one size fits all?
Yeah, that's a great question. So would I agree that retrofitting schemes needs to be not based on one size fits all? Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of their biggest downfalls at the moment, is that it doesn't suit every type of house. And all of the research that we've done to date has said that we do need a much more tailored and targeted approach to retrofitting that's much more inclusive and includes everyone. I think the point on heat pumps is really interesting. And that's why we're focusing on heat pumps more so for rural homes. And that's what the SEAI heat study has said as well, that heat pumps are really suitable for one-off rural homes, but what's suitable for urban areas will be district heating. And district heating is really interesting because it's basically using waste heat to supply residential heat to homes in urban areas. And where that's at the moment, most EU countries have really solid district heating schemes that they've had for years. But Ireland has, I think, one at the moment out in Tallaght. But a really exciting thing that we were working on was making sure that the new programme for government commits to enacting the district heating legislation that has been brought to the Dáil, and the new programme for government does have a commitment on district heating, and that will really be the heat decarbonisation solution for urban areas. But yeah, I would definitely agree that the SEAI grants to date don't suit everyone. And another exciting EU thing that's coming in through the Energy Efficiency Directive is that every local authority with over 45,000 inhabitants will have to do their own local heating and cooling plan, and that will be a real opportunity to get the district heating networks up off the ground. And I think with the new legislation coming in as well, there'll be more movement on it. It will require a lot of capital, I think, up front. So there's lots of decisions that need to be made on the district heating front, but what the SEAI are saying so far is that it will be heat pumps for rural one-off housing and district heating for urban areas. But we still, as I said, we have a long way to go still. We're still we're still paddy last in Europe for renewable heat so far. So yeah. It's an interesting policy area, and there's still a long way to go with it.
Thanks, Claire. And feel free, anyone, if someone prefers to speak as well, feel free to put on your camera and unmute yourself, or raise your hand. There's an option at the bottom of Zoom, so you should be able to do so. There's another question here, and I'm not sure who or perhaps anyone who's speaking today can address this. So after Trump's election and Greens near wipeout in November, I'm feeling pessimistic about us combating climate change. Can you reassure me that I'm wrong? So this is a bit of I suppose, a difficult question, and I think, Oisín, you were kind of touching it or talking about it a bit before. Is there anyone who'd like to mention this? And thanks so much as well, Eric, for sharing, because I know it is a difficult and emotional time right now.
Sturka, I mean, I can have a go at that. Do you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, no, you can come in. I'm not going to disagree, Eric. I don't know if you're leaving or not, but I'm not going to disagree too much that it's quite a difficult time. But I think we've come from more difficult times before when climate change and climate change policies weren't even on the table. I think if you look at Trump, yeah, climate is going to be a big loser with him, but also many other types of people are going to be big losers, and particularly immigrants in America. So I think it's a tough time for many outside our movement as well, and to really think about how we support each other around abortion rights, about LGBTQ plus people as well. So it's, but what we're saying, and what I think, particularly when you look at what has happened, and Biden and the Democrats, in many cases, were not much better, and actually baby drilled more than the previous government. So I think administration. So I think we have to be realistic that there's a lot of structures and systems that many of us have been campaigning for, like the IRA, the Reduction Act in America, that are set up like the European climate law, that are in place, that we just have to keep using those systems and leverages to hold people to account, and hope that our institutions that we've all worked in and set up around human rights, around climate, stay strong and stay the course. I think Europe is actually probably one of the bastions of hope, which I'm sometimes don't know if I always believe that, but actually what is happening in Europe around the climate law, like there is a massive pushback, and there's a lot of legislation that we have all worked on around corporate accountability at the moment that are under attack. But there also are many structures, and it's like sometimes you think of, we're talking about mushrooms, like there's lots of roots that have grown out from the policies, and there's administrations, and there's structures set up that keep what we're campaigning for in line and keep moving. And a lot of it, as Oisin said, is around legal obligation and legal accountability. Unfortunately, as well, I think I'm trying to be positive, and there aren't many positive things, but the impact of the climate on our weather system and the frequency of that is something that we cannot ignore at times, and you've seen it over the last few weeks as well. So I definitely, sadly, it's a truth that I think many people can't ignore. But as a movement, what did we do before? Like, I think someone was commenting on our program for government and our new cabinet being quite desperate and quite sad, but like, it's not that different from what the government we had 10 years ago. It's not that. And then if you think about the areas I've worked on in abortion rights, we had the same government like this, worse actually, probably, that we succeeded in pushing through constitutional change. So I think we have to just keep moving in the groups that we move in, that we have to keep talking to people that care, and really put our energy in holding governments to account. Hopefully Trump won't be post 4 years, won't stay beyond that. But it is a really challenging time for anyone who's been involved in international systems, international relations, like seeing the structures got quite cozy in the systems and balance of power, and look like what's happening in Gaza, and you look to the ICC or the ICJ, and these are the people that you felt that could and make a difference, and sometimes that doesn't happen. The only other positive thing I can think is in the funding space, when things are so negative, I do feel like there are a lot of good philanthropic people that want to push back and help organizations like ourselves push back. So that's where I feel we're at the moment, but I don't think my vision of the world is there yet, but we're still pushing towards it. Might never come though. Oisin, do you have anything more to say?
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, Eric's question, can we reassure you that you're wrong, Eric? No, I'm afraid we can't reassure you that you're wrong. But I think it's, I mean, Circa's covered most of the ground. But just to say, in the Irish context, I think the difference is that we have the climate law. First, I don't think the government is as bad. Like, I think we have managed to move climate culturally to a more mainstream issue, albeit not satisfactorily. It's like, we're not going to get fast enough or fair enough just by leaving any government to their own devices. But culturally, you know, our government can't denounce climate like a US government could, thank God, or even like some of the other European governments are. So that's better. And then the law makes it harder for them to walk away anyway. But on the US side, the only thing I'd say is, I mean, Trump is just like awful, obviously. But Again, there are trends that and structural issues that will mean his, well, maybe not, I was going to say his bark will be worse than his bite to some degree. I mean, his bite's pretty bad. It'll be dismantling the EPA and so on if he can. But the market is moving to renewables over to, like, the businesses are moving to renewables. You know, coal is not coming back no matter what Trump does. It didn't come back during his last term and it won't come back now. Like, solar, more new solar came on the grid in the last few years in the US than any other new electricity source, and that's not going to change. You know, energy, the centers of energy in the US, like Texas, they're doing renewables as much as anything else. Now, obviously, if they can keep making money from fossil fuels, they will still do that. And they will be doing that under Trump, and we will have to, you know, I'm sure our colleagues and comrades around the world will have to be campaigning to keep it in the ground more than ever. But the other thing, of course, is the states in the US. It is a federal system, and the likes of California with Gavin Newsom and others, not perfect, of course, but you know, it's the 8th largest economy in the world. But so this is the 3rd time a US government in this century has pulled out of a climate accord. George Bush did it in 2001. Trump did it in 2017 and again now. So, and in that time, US cities and US, as well as the market, US cities, US states, and US citizens, you know, campaigned and got together to try to keep them in Kyoto, or keep them in Paris, or keep them moving in the right direction. So, Trump's ruinous rule won't be uncontested, put it that way. And so we will have to, you know, collaborate and work in solidarity with people around the world to get the best outcomes possible.
Thanks for the input there. I really like the comment from Sarah about the virtual hug. I think we can definitely all give each other all a virtual hug at this point. There is a quick question here, and I lost it now. There's been a number of questions. And I'm not sure, Claire, if you would know this, but does the SEIA have a speaker to give some info to a local group, or should we seek someone from the council? Not sure if you have any.
Do you want to send me an email? Because it kind of depends on what the group is and what information you want. I'll put my email in the chat.
Sorry.
Great.
To whom should I send it to? Sorcha, is it?
So can you see, I put my email
to Claire. Thank you.
into the chat. It's just Claire, CLARE @foe.ie.
Thank you. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Susan.
Yeah, so we'll have to move on to some other updates. But I saw there's a few more questions, and there might be some questions that come up after this as well. So feel free to email us as well. So I'll share just our info at foe.ie, and we'll make sure to send it to the correct person so your answer can be, or your question can be answered. Sorry. Yeah, so there is a sort of Friends of the Earth update. So I'll hand it over to you, Oisín or Anne, to speak a little bit more about that.
It's me, I think, to start with. Others maybe joining in. Sorry, so I'd almost forgotten this part because I've been so engaged in talking about the campaigning, both past and present. So I've mentioned a few times in this conversation so far how long I've been at this, and how a sense of perspective can help us see the way through challenging campaigning times. I'll get a sense of you know, what the problems we face now, how they compare, and learn from the past. But basically, it is 20 years ago this week that I started working for Friends of the Earth, and it has been an extraordinary privilege and an extraordinary time as we have campaigned for all the things we've mentioned tonight and many more. But I have decided that 20 years is a long time, and that's because Friends of the Earth is in such a strong position, has never been stronger. Our campaigns are so fab, and our team are so fab, and our board are brilliant. You may hear from some of the board now, but our board, who are really crucial to keep us on the straight and narrow, and who govern Friends of the Earth on your behalf, is a very strong board. But because of all of that, I think now is a good time for me to move on and to seek new adventures somewhere. So I have told the board that I will be standing down as Chief Executive of Friends of the Earth in a couple of months' time, and they have begun the process of, which will take a while, they've begun the work on the process to recruit a new CEO. And in the meantime, my colleagues who were maybe a little bit surprised when I told them a week or so ago, are, as you can see, already up and running and at it and ready to take on the world and change things for the better. So it's been amazing working for Friends of the Earth. I'd never been in a job for more than 2 years, 3 years when I joined in 2005. And I didn't expect to be here for more than 5 or maybe, who knows, 8, 10 years. So I never expected to be here for 20. But it is the creativity and the commitment of my colleagues, and of course that's kept me here, and the support of all of you guys, of all of the supporters who've made. You've seen me write this often enough that it is our supporters. Our campaigning depends entirely on our supporters. Your support, your both physical and financial, makes it possible, and your participation is what makes it powerful. And it's been an amazing journey as we've built. We've built an organization from, I was the only employee when we started, but we've built a campaigning structure and a campaigning culture on climate in Ireland that didn't exist 20 years ago, still isn't as widespread as we'd like it. And we've built coalitions and we've joined forces with overseas aid agencies and the people I mentioned when I was talking about Claire's work, overseas aid agencies, environmental NGOs, trade unions, and others along the way, with our supporters at our shoulder, to influence laws and policies. It's been an extraordinary privilege and an extraordinary thrill, really, more than not just a privilege, to do that for 20 years with all of you. But it is a good moment to move on, and I'm sad, but I'm also excited for the future of Friends of the Earth, and slightly terrified for my own future. But that's a whole other conversation. That's a whole other webinar. So yeah, that's the Friends of the Earth announcement we have for this evening, and I think one of our board members wants to chip in before we can. Well, I don't know if there's taking questions as such, but we are here till 5:30 if needs be.
Thanks, Oisín. And I suppose it's opportune. I suppose the board really wanted to kind of make this announcement to all of you first, as the people who are probably the closest and more committed to us, and an email will go out later. But I suppose for the board, and probably on behalf of all of you and our supporters, is to really offer our deep appreciation of Oisín and our thanks. 20 years of service, I think we are very, very lucky, and we need to look at the glass, half full, to have had 20 years, to have built this movement, the impact on Ireland, the impact on Friends of the Earth, the fact that we as a board step back and go, gosh, yes, we're shocked, we're saddened, we don't want you to go, but at the same time, we also feel confident that we can let you go, that this organization is not dependent on one person, that we actually have a fantastic team of really committed people that I'm so proud. You've seen some of them speak tonight. So proud that they are working passionately on behalf of all of us. And that's a team that Oisín has built up, and an organization I think that we can be really proud of. I mean, the legacy is really quite significant. And I think probably the Climate Act is probably the thing that we will hold on to, because that draws a line that hopefully keeps us honest and keeps us accountable and keeps everybody on the straight and narrow. So to Oisín and all the people in Friends of the Earth over the years who worked tirelessly on making that happen, I offer my thanks, and I think probably everyone on this call does too. That's why we're all here and so passionate. So Oisín leaves us in a very strong place, and I think really thank you, Oisín, for that. And I suppose the board then have reflected and really wanted just to let you know our commitment, that our ambition stays high. We're not taking a pause. We're not going to regroup. We're going to keep thinking, and we're going to keep strategizing, and we're going to keep the team totally focused on the changes that need to happen. So we're just committed to working extra hard to bring this transition to a successful replacement, so that Oisín can feel happy that he made the right decision, the team can be happy that they've got good leadership, and we as a movement know that we have got really strong leadership taking us forward. So Oisín, in passing the baton on, we thank him hugely. It's a critical time, but I want to assure all of you as members that it's a process that we have taken on, and it is in train, and we will keep everybody posted. And once we know the job description is all finalized, you'll all be let know, and hopefully you'll rattle your networks. This is probably going to be one of the most exciting jobs that's going to come up, most influential jobs that's going to come up in a long time if you're involved in the environment and climate. And I'm sure we will get an excellent person. Big shoes to fill, but I'm sure we will get an excellent person. But first, I really want to just say thank you to Oisín, and I hope we will have a big celebration of the last 20 years and your legacy in the not too distant future.
Thanks. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure if somebody unmuted themselves. But yeah, I think there's not many much words I can really add to that. So yeah, it's I don't even know how to. I think Emma, you summed it up really beautiful. And I see the comments in the chat there, which is really touching to see. We're open the floor now to any questions about this particular topic. So feel free to again put something in the chat or unmute yourself and raise your hand. All right. I don't think there is any questions so far. Again, if there's any questions that come up about this, or even what I said, any questions that were not answered before, or questions you might have, feel free to send us an email at info@foe.ie. And so yeah, I think we can end the call here now. So thanks everyone for joining.